All right, well, let's get going. Hi, everyone. I'm Joel McCower, and this is the business case of Rethinking Plastic, just a destination check. I don't think we need to spend much time setting this up. I think you all know the drill. This is plastic waste has long been an issue and continues to become more so every year. Companies are being pressed to do something about it, and some have made some bold commitments. But how's that going? What does it take? What's the business case for addressing plastic pollution? And what are the financial and reputational incentives for shifting your packaging strategy? We're going to talk about that and more. We've got a great panel of Erin Simon, who's the head of plastic waste and business at World Wildlife Fund. Meredith Leahy, is a waste diversion manager at Rubicon Global, and you'll hear about that organization in a minute. Elpa Sutaria is general manager of sustainability at Coca-Cola. And Steve Sikora is vice president and head of Americas at the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. So welcome to all of you. And I'm going to go around and hear a little bit about so where you come to as you look at plastic and the business case. Just a few minutes for each of you, and then we'll get more into a discussion. And of course, want to hear all of your questions and comments, so keep those coming on the chat. But Meredith, I want to start with you, since you start at the end of this, of the waste problem that everyone's grappling with at Rubicon Global. First of all, I want to hear a little bit about Rubicon. I know you'll tell us that, but talk about how you see plastic waste evolving in this moment, and the and how you support customers in handling that.
Sure. So a little bit of introduction. As Joel mentioned, my name is Meredith Leahy. I'm a waste diversion manager for Rubicon. Rubicon is a software company, and our core mission is to end waste. That kind of shapes everything that we do. As part of our services, we support over 50 cities worldwide to implement smart city tech that makes municipal fleets more efficient and gathers data on waste and recycling collection, as well as other important data points for city decision makers to improve lives for their citizens. We also operate in the commercial sector. So that means that we manage waste and recycling streams for small, medium businesses, all the way up to large Fortune 500 companies. As far as my specific role at Rubicon, I'm on the circular solutions team, and we are focused on the harder to recycle materials. So I work with a large network of haulers, vendors, recyclers, and we're all trying to find diversion options for as many materials as possible for our customers to keep that material out of the landfill and hopefully improve the planet in the working there. And then, so as part of the harder to recycle materials, that can mean appliances, electronics, and of course plastics, which is why we're here today. So to Joel's question about how we go about managing that for our customers, what do we do with all this waste? So we just have kind of quite a variety of customers, from big box retail, restaurants, home improvement locations, all sorts of different customers. So we try to figure out, just have a level set, like what do they actually have? What kind of materials are they generating, at what frequency? And then we try to figure out what kind of options that they have. What are those solutions that might be there already, that might be in the marketplace that they weren't aware of, and try to provide those kind of solutions for them right off the bat. It might be just a matter of improving their programs that are already in place. Perhaps they're not optimizing their programs that they already have, or maybe they need to clean up the quality or adhere to industry specs to be able to push that material even further so that it can be utilized by end users. So we kind of do a lot of different multiple things to figure that out. And then if there aren't a lot of options, then we kind of maybe drive the upstream conversation and why those materials aren't going to be recycled in today's market. But again, as we all know, waste is local, but also recycling options can be local or regional as well. So it really depends sometimes on the area of the country what the material is, the frequency, and those kind of things to figure out what can be done with those materials. And that's what we do each and every day at Rubicon.
So a lot of companies, and we'll hear from Coca-Cola in a few minutes, have made commitments to get to zero or net zero or some form of eliminating plastic waste. How hard is that in terms of, from your perspective, of helping them able to do that? And what's the biggest barrier you see facing?
For us, I think a lot of the barriers are just, the domestic markets are still growing. So as a result of all the Chinese restrictions, that really put a big obstacle in a lot of the material that we were handling on the plastic side. So luckily, I think we're doing a good job of trying to figure out, being introspective in this country to figure out what are the domestic options that we can have or develop. It won't happen instantaneously, but it is a process, and there are, capabilities domestically that will be coming down the pike. So we're looking forward to those, and just kind of figuring out together what can be done collectively, because we're dealing with the material after it's already been designed, it's been consumed, and it needs to find an end market. So other things that can be done are just from the design perspective. We hope that the material can be maybe designed better in the future for better compatibility for the recycling system that's currently in place. So sometimes we have challenges with plastics that maybe are multi-material, or plastics that come with metal attached to them. Obviously, just kind of is more difficult to recycle those materials. So if there's a little bit more conscientious effort ahead of time for maybe businesses to choose those components of their product in a better way so that they can be recycled in the current system. And then also just the demand, we hope that more products will contain recycled content so that all the material that we're dealing with from our customers, and we're trying to find end outlets for that, there has to be an end market for it. So you can design well, you can sort it, you can collect it and do all those things well, but if there's not, at the end of the day, a home for that material to be used in a future product, then we're kind of at a fruitless destination there. So we all kind of have to work together on all those steps in the recycling supply chain.
Well, let's stay down at that sort of waste management part of that and turn to Steve Sikra, the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, based in Singapore, but you are now taking on the U.S. or the Americas role, North and South America role. Talk a little bit about the ability to create these markets and how you see what the leverage points are in solving this problem that Meredith's talking about.
Well, thank you. Yes. Let me give a quick background on myself. So Steve Sikra, as you said, I come to the Alliance to End Plastic Waste after a career at the Procter & Gamble company. P&G was one of the formative members of the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, and very quickly on the Alliance. So the Alliance today consists of 52 member companies, all committed to end plastic waste in the environment. So these companies have committed at the CEO level to participate, to help guide and lead the Alliance, to fund it, to provide technical resources, and to help set strategies to end plastic waste in the environment. As you said, Joel, I come back to the Americas from a year in Singapore. So we have a focus in South and Southeast Asia, but many of our member companies say, what can we do at home? We want to do some things in this backyard of the world, in the Americas, in North America and South America. And so I recently returned to Texas, where I'm starting the Americas branch, and we'll be focusing on putting some projects on the ground here. And projects that we work in within the Alliance include infrastructure projects to help on the collection side. To help on the demand side, we work with thematic expert groups. So we have 4 pillars of investment: infrastructure, innovation, education, and cleanup. We have 5 themes that we focus on. Design for circularity is one, as Meredith said. Starting on the front end is absolutely vital. We believe in designing for a minimum and designing with recycled content, and designing for recycling itself to drive circularity. The second theme that we look at is advanced recovery and recycling. Ultra critical. The mechanical recycling systems of today are good. We want to see them be used more. But to use recycled materials, particularly the hard to recycle materials, in a broader set of applications, we think chemical recycling is a necessity that will help remove colors, contaminants, and so forth, and really allow use of recyclate back in a broader range of applications. We have a focus on what we call societal behavior. We think participation is a critical factor for each and every one of us, at the individual level, at the corporate level, at the government level. We focus on engaging with cities because engaging with the constituency of the cities, of the communities at large, and this spans not just citizens, but academia, governments, etc. Getting those cities engaged and owning part of the waste management solution is what we're committed to doing. And then finally, enhancing the value of recycled material. So when we can get citizens, companies, corporations to view plastic waste as a commodity, as a feedstock, then we start to close these circularity gaps and put it back into a circular economy so we can use these materials over and over again.
Yeah. Well, I want to get to that with Alpa in just a second, but before we do, Stephen, the Alliance has been around for, I want to say, 3-ish years, 3 or maybe even 4. It's been around for a little bit of time, maybe 3 years, let's say. You'll tell me if I'm wrong, but and you've been working primarily in Southeast Asia. Talk a little bit about how it's been going. What have you been able to do in that part of the world where the organization has really focused its energies to date to change the dynamics, move the needle, and give us some hope?
But thanks, Joel. I appreciate that. And you're right. I'll give you the history. So the Alliance itself started in January of 2019 with 27 committed member companies. We ran for 9 months with a volunteer staff, including myself. And in October of 2019, we brought on employee number 1, our CEO, Jacob Dewar. We're very happy to have Jacob come to us from the United Nations Environment, and he's really been a pinnacle of leadership for the Alliance. Our staff came on board, and my role in Singapore was Chief of Staff. I helped Jacob recruit our lead team. And so now we have a staff of 40 plus. We also have loaned executives from our member companies. And with the help of the staff and the loaned executives, we have 28 projects in the portfolio today. We've been focusing on a couple of things. I'll separate them into innovative ideas and solution sets, where we've used the group Plug and Play as an example to sponsor different events across the globe as a forum to share ideas and innovations. And we've been funding these types of plug and play events, and we'll continue to do that because they spawn very good activities for either the Alliance or others to invest and take to the next level. So we'll continue with that. We've got a couple of programs that have been born from Plug and Play that are advancing. There's a program separate from innovation, which really focuses on the foundation of infrastructure need. And so we're working with different organizations in Gembrana, building off a program called STOP, where we're putting basic infrastructure programs in place. And we have a good number of MRFs that just started last year, despite the pandemic and despite the travel restrictions. We have MRFs that started up in Indonesia in December of last year. More importantly, building off this foundation, we have a mechanism in mind and funding underway that will take that and multiply it 5 and 10-fold. And to do so with some level of payback, but investing on the front end with a public-private partnership, so that the spirit of the Gembrana project being multiplied many times is an example of what we're going after. So really the mission of the Alliance is about helping to develop and accelerate solutions, to work with communities to do so, and to unlock additional dollars for this large investment that might be needed. And that's a very good example of a foundational project and then multiplying it again for 10 times the impact. And we continue to do those types of scaling projects as a testament to answer, is it right to start this particular one? Also, pioneering programs, and I'll just put in a good word for some of the programs that we've made what we call smart bets on. Of course, not all programs are going to make it through, so we have some starts and stops. But with 28 good programs, we forecast when they come to fruition, we'll have ended over 375 million tons of waste from the environment. That just scratches the surface. And 375 KTA. And we plan on multiplying that further and further around the world and bringing some of that work to the Americas. Great.
Well, I want to hear more about that, but I want to turn now to Alpa Sutaria at Coca-Cola. Alpa, Coke has made some big commitments on this. I guess, from a perspective of a large company like Coke, you would see the threat of plastic waste and the pushback on that as either a threat or an opportunity for Coca-Cola. How are you seeing that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Let me start maybe with the context. So Coca-Cola company needs no introduction, but we definitely recognize as an organization around the world that the concerns around plastic waste have been mounting. And so back in 2018, our company committed to taking action to really drive some major changes. We launched an initiative called World Without Waste. As a part of that initiative, we made the commitment by the end of the decade to fully use approximately 50% recycled content across our portfolio. And we're well on our way to achieving that. As a matter of fact, today, we've announced that in the United States, we're launching a series of packages across starting with our Coca-Cola brand, but also including several of our largest and most loved brands, including Dasani and Smartwater, are transitioning series of packages to 100% recycled plastic use, PET use, and starting in selected markets across the United States. And then further, as we get into the summer, we'll be launching a series of packages in a new size, a 13.2 ounce size, to actually use 100% recycled plastic across the entire nation. So it's a huge step change in actually delivering on this commitment, and it's just the beginning. We'll be doing a lot more. But to answer your question, Joel, it's both an opportunity and a risk for us. Clearly, the opportunity is that we want to sustainably deliver what our consumers and stakeholders are asking for. And that also drives, we believe, in a great way, business growth. So the biggest opportunity that we're immediately working on is to make sure that our packaging that we put out into the world contains 100% recycled plastic materials. And that ultimately, of course, decreases the use of virgin plastic. And at the same time, we get the extended benefit of decreasing carbon emissions and ultimately making progress against our World Without Waste goals. And as we do this, through our portfolio of 100% rPET or plastic packaging, we're reducing the use of new plastic by the end of this year, 20% compared to where we were when we started World Without Waste back in 2018. So a very, very significant step change. And so, as we kind of think about the recyclability of products, and we heard this from Meredith as well as from Stephen, it's really important to design our packaging so that it can use recycled materials, and that helps with the demand creation. But we're also working on bringing back those materials so that we can use them again and again. And we really know that developing a circular economy, one where we can partner with the material recovery facilities, the people that are processing the material so that we can bring it back in the form of really clean and beautiful recycled PET we can use again in our packaging is very important. And that's where we need to partner across the spectrum to make sure that we're actually delivering that. If we don't do that well, that does become a risk, of course. And so that's where I think that, we need to make sure that we have balanced focus. And I think that we're moving down that path pretty effectively already.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting, people, that your effort is on the packaging that you're going to be using to sell product, which makes, of course, sense, as opposed to the collection of it, although you want to support players there. But, getting to the title of the session, is there a business case for you here other than the right to operate is a business case, social license to operate? But is there a business for Coca-Cola in all of this, or is this just seen as the price of doing business?
No, it's much more than the price of doing business. There's definitely, we think, opportunity. And the opportunity comes in the form of making sure that we're meeting our consumers and our customers where they are. And when our consumers and customers want a more sustainable portfolio of packages with beverages that they love, that's exactly the right thing for us to be able to do. And it's not just about being defensive, right? We want to make sure that we're creating a sustainable future that is also supported by an economic system that works. And when I say an economic system that works, that means that we want to be able to create great packaging that has a life and can be reused over and over again in a variety of ways. And if we can do that in a way that promotes business growth, and business growth not just for our company, but for the entire ecosystem of participants that are participating in that process, it's a win-win. And so we think that that sustainability is really something to be addressed as an opportunity.
Yeah. Well, let me turn to Aaron now. And Aaron, what does business leadership look like around plastic waste in 2021?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question because it's changing, right?
Yeah.
So for those of you who I haven't met, I lead up plastic waste and business in WWF. And so the role that I do is really helping companies to navigate this from these major commitments to understanding where they have the opportunity for impact and targeting the right strategies, but then really getting to that collective action and really to that leadership and advocacy level, right? 5 years ago, it was about saying you were accountable for this problem and owning it, right? That has changed in the last decade. The last 5 years. Because and the goalposts continue to move as a part of that, right? So leadership is no longer about just having a public commitment out there. It's number one, showing progress on those commitments. It's also increasing your ambition around those, moving, to reduction of use. And that's not because I'm saying plastic is bad. I'm saying that we need to be making the circle smaller in the first place, because what we're taking from the planet is overtaxing the planet. So we need to reduce what we're demanding from the planet, and we need to keep it in the system in, circular technologies, whether that's new business models like reuse, whether that's fixing our recycling system, whether that's focusing on how to make composting work for some solutions. It's about fixing those so we can keep cascading the value. And so leadership continues to look like at different points in that where companies have powerful leverage, it's in sourcing of materials, right? Moving to all sustainably sourced, whether that's recycled content, sustainably sourced bio. And I'm talking about not just being responsible in the way you take things from the planet, but being regenerative, right? Giving back to the planet and biodiversity and communities in the process, and designing things that are easy for the consumer, right? And that are going to be easy for whatever system it's supposed to get back to them in, right? Whether that's a reuse system or a recycling system, touching on what Alpa and Meredith discussed around designing for the system you're going to be ending up in recycling, and then making sure that there's equity of access for that. And so advocating for that through policy and leadership around saying, how are we going to invest in the system that we all depend on? So it's no longer just about goals. It's about, contributing to this major system that we have to overhaul, and not just one, all these different models of that, reuse, recycling, compost, all of those systems that allow us to cascade the value of those materials.
So over the past couple of years, we've seen this mushrooming of corporate commitments, and companies like Coca-Cola and so many others who are leaning into this and saying we are committed to doing A, B, and C. how do you, a couple of years into this now or so, how do you view, how do you think about the progress? Are you happy with the progress that's being made?
I am happy. I'm cautiously optimistic. Let's put it that way. I have to be that way in the world that I live in. I work for an organization that's trying to protect ourselves, like protect this planet for future generations. And so we see a lot of rough numbers, right? If you look at the Living Planet Report 2020 that just came out, it showcases that we're not hitting the mark on preserving our resources so well. But I have seen such momentum and collective movement, which is really necessary to get to systems change in the area of plastic waste, that I feel more optimistic than I do about some other issues, right? And I think one of the big moves that I've seen over the past 12 to 24 months has been on the area of corporations, not just, committing and taking actions within their own supply chains, but also committing and making bold statements around the need for better policy and better legislation. And I think that's the next wave. Over 2021, you're going to see a lot of that national level policy discussion in the US, especially. To get to those recycled content commitments, we currently have a 72% landfill rate in the US. We got a long way to go to get that turned around, right? So you're seeing a lot more vocal activity around that, a lot more support, and a lot more understanding from this broad spectrum of stakeholders that we can do better if we do it together, right? Those who haven't seen it eye to eye in the past are like, okay, we still don't totally agree, but let's start with what we do agree on, right? So I think that that's going to be, that type of progress is giving me more optimism. I think in a few years, we're also going to see that system start to step change. And then the goals and targets that these companies are committing to now are really going to start to show in the numbers that they report on, right? Because there's some amount of this chicken and egg of everybody trying to lean in together and waiting for it all to sort of like hook in to get it to work, if that makes sense.
Well, one of the big parts of, go ahead, Alpa.
I was going to just add to that. I completely agree with you, Erin. I feel that over the last 2 years in particular, we've seen a real step change in not just the commitments, but the actions. And now the actions are leaning into the harder problems, which none of us can solve alone. So it is requiring this kind of concerted effort across companies, NGOs, policymakers and others to really kind of come together and now start to look at these challenges that we have much more at both a macro as well as a local basis. We as a company, yes, we're a global company. Coca-Cola Company is known all around the world, but we're also hyper-local. There isn't a community in the United States where we're not present. And so that's really where we feel that the challenges and the opportunities are for us to really be able to start to close the loop effectively in those local communities. And that's where the partnerships will matter the most.
One big ingredient in all of this is education. And, this is very much, I know I'm a week late in saying this, but this is very much a Groundhog Day kind of conversation, because I've been watching for well over 30 years, in my case, talking about how we educate consumers to change them, much as we did with smoking and seatbelts and so many other things over the years, and now masks. Meredith, I'm curious, what do you see as the opportunity to educate, and who is the most the ripest audience, I guess, for educating in a way that would have leverage the change that we all want to see around plastic waste?
Sure. So with the companies that we deal with, they are becoming more and more interested in plastic waste and trying to figure out their impact in the materials that they generate. So I think they're hearing from their own constituents, from their own investors, that this is not going to go away. This is an important piece to kind of figure out and work out collectively. We're hearing from the financial institutions that ESG and these kind of things related to recycling are so important that some companies won't have access to capital, because if they don't have a great program in place to handle all these materials, then they're not going to be able to grow in the way that they would want or attract new customers or consumers for their products. So I think that's an important piece. But as far as the education, we oftentimes just provide training to to our customers to be able to get them on the right page to know how to recycle, what to recycle, how to recycle it more effectively. Because a lot of times they have the right motivations, but they just don't have the right information. So they don't know how to reduce their contamination levels for different bales of material. They don't know how to maybe load a trailer of commodity that will go to an end user where they could get the best rebate for their material. So there's, once they're kind of realizing what they have, and we try to bring analytics and data so that they can kind of see the numbers of how much they're generating and their actual impacts of maybe they're sending material to the landfill and they're realizing those volumes once they kind of take a better look at that material. So we try to help mitigate those risks for those customers with providing them some solutions. And sometimes they come to us with plastic material they've sent to a landfill or they just can't find an option for it. But we try to dig in deep and try to reach out to our network of haulers and vendors and figure out if there are any options and at least present them those kind of variables that they may need to consider in order to find those outlets or prepare it to a certain quality level to be able to send it to an end user and that it could be recycled.
I want to stick with this education issue because it really is a Groundhog Day thing. It's this conversation that and not for all the talk about that, the plastic recycling rates haven't been getting better. In fact, they've been getting worse. So, Stephen, I'm curious from your experience in Southeast Asia or anywhere, frankly, that where education has been able to make a difference, where you've actually been able to see rates go up in some significant way, and who are you educating with what kind of message?
Mm-hmm. It's an important question, Joel. And if I back up, I think the most effective education programs have a couple components. Number one, it's very simple. We tend to make things extremely complicated. And let's face it, the resin identification codes 1 through 7, they're a bit confusing. I'm a material science engineer, and I'm often asked a very simple question by my wife: can I recycle this here? Well, the answer is it depends on where I'm at. It depends on the capabilities in that very local location. Alpa, you had talked about being engraved hyper locally. And so it's really important to understand what the local system can manage. So keeping that message simple, for me, the message is if it's plastic, put it in the bin. If it's rigid plastic, put it in the bin. If it's film, do a little bit of investigation because a lot of systems can't handle it yet. I'm optimistic because we're putting in lots of infrastructure systems to take care of film, whether it's Material Recovery for the Future program that we worked on in Pennsylvania, or programs that are going to manifest themselves in the US, building on that type of learning. But a second component of education is action. And so we like to look at it as education and engagement. And a lot of us may have taken that one course in college where we put the book on the shelf. And it was great at the time, but it's better when you can take that education, that knowledge, and put it to use. For example, on beach cleanups that we've done in Southeast Asia, when kids can see the beach for the very first time in their life and play soccer on the beach the first time, because you're engaging them not only in the cleanup, but giving them an alternative in a recycling infrastructure that creates jobs. So the kids see the immediate benefit of a clean beach and a place to play soccer, an area to go fishing. That engagement, along with that education, goes a long way. Of course, for the adult, the creation of jobs and that alternative to trash or litter or burning is what you need to do. So coupling that education at the right point in time is vital. If I take the example in the U.S., for example.
I want to, Steve, I want to move on because we've got about 10 minutes. I got a lot of questions. So I want to go to Alpa on this because I think, you've got the biggest megaphone of anyone in the room. And your reach is unparalleled, by almost any other brand. So you have a lot of potential to really be teaching your markets, which is everybody, how do you do this? And I agree with, Stephen, that yeah, 1 through 7 is complicated, but a soda bottle is a soda bottle, and that's always going to be PET these days, or glass, but in a few places. But so how are you? What are you doing to try to educate people to help achieve the goals that you've already set?
Yeah, it is something that is very much front of mind for us as a company. I mentioned the new packaging that we're rolling out starting today that is 100% recycled. We're using that packaging and our voice as a company and the great relationship that we have with our consumers to actually not only educate, but create a call to action. It's very much what you said, Stephen. Provide a simple, clear message with a call to action. So when you see this new packaging, people will see there is a request for the person who is enjoying that great bottle of Coke or Dasani to please recycle this package as soon as you're done enjoying it and recycle it with a cap. Very clear, very simple, very inspiring. And not only is it a message that they're going to get when they're enjoying the package and the beverage itself, but actually supported by what we're telling consumers and what we're telling the public through, when they're buying in the grocery store or in the convenience retail store, or when they're listening to the radio or seeing a billboard. So we have, I think, a great opportunity to create an awareness and just a change in the mindset of the average person who's just enjoying a Coke, that they know that they want to do something with that bottle as soon as they're done with it.
Yeah.
And I think that will make a tremendous change.
Yeah, good. Another question for you, and then I want to go to Aaron with this question as well. What about reuse? I mean, this seems to be quite the, coming back. We all know about Loop and that whole business model. What do you see as the potential there for Coca-Cola, and Aaron, for anyone else? Have you looked into how we do reusable bottles, reusable cups, or anything of that sort?
We have been actively working on that in a series of pilots and initiatives. So we, of course, are working on returnables and refillables. As a matter of fact, people who are aware of the Coca-Cola business around the world know that returnable glass is a big business for us in many parts of the world, and we're experimenting and thinking about different ways to make it a modern proposition again in the United States, but also refillables. We have new platforms such as Dasani PureFill, and the platforms that have been around for a long time. Everybody knows you can get a fountain beverage, a Coca-Cola or a Sprite or a Diet Coke or a Coca-Cola Zero Sugar or a Fanta, in so many different places. And so how do we leverage all of these different options that we have to really help us address the challenge of packaging waste and making sure that no matter how people are getting their beverages, they're doing it in a sustainable way.
Yeah. Aaron?
I mean, so if we go back to this whole thing about using less, right, part of that is rethinking how we get the product to the consumer. And so reuse, this whole shared economy, right, it's not new, as Alpha mentioned. We've had reuse for a long time. But we need to think about how we can utilize that as a way to reduce our impact, broadly reduce waste, and of course, provide the consumer with what they want. One of the things that we need to really think about with reuse that is going to be important is that we don't assume that it's just going to be better, right? Reusable containers are are more resource intensive, right? Because it's much more durable. And so arguably the environmental footprint of that vessel is going to be greater than a single use. So you have to meet the threshold of how many uses it's required to get it, to meet that single use item. And so in fact, the key to a reusable system being better is that it is reused. And so the same way that the key to a single use solution that gets recycled being good is that it gets recycled, we need to make sure that the system itself is in place to, whether you're on the go, whether you're in your home, to make sure that that you can collect, clean, refill, process all of those things. And so what we don't want to do with reuse is make the same mistakes that we did in single use, is proliferate solutions without thinking about the shared system we all depend on, and really thinking about the fact that the consumer is going to have an important important role to play in that.
It's the system, stupid, right? That's the old line. So we're almost out of time, but I want to ask each of you one question, and we only have a minute for each of you to do this. But if you were king or queen of the plastic value chain. I don't know what, something like that. And you could do one thing that would have a big impact. What would that be? Steve, I want to start with you.
Thanks, Joel. When I look at the greatest challenge that we have, I think it's one of time. Because when we think of all the different mechanisms required to end plastic waste in the environment, it's a function across the entire supply chain, from the design side, the collection side, the recovery, the separation and the reuse side. And there's great work going on in terms of understanding life cycle footprints. But when we talk about putting steel in the ground and developing these recovery systems for infrastructure or reuse, it takes time. And so if we could accelerate the clock a bit, make good on our commitments, we have the technology, we have the support. It takes time to put these into place. And so we just need to continue with this, be committed for the long haul, and solutions will come to bear, and we will solve this problem.
Yeah, 40 million plastic bottles disposed of every minute, so 45 million during this session. Time is clearly critical. Meredith, what about you?
I would say on the demand side, there still needs to be more companies that are committed to recycled content in their products. There's large ones like Coca-Cola is committing to that, and that's great. There's so many different companies that need to be committed as well to have that into their products, because the demand market really monetizes the entire supply chain, so that there's more motivation for groups to upgrade their equipment to include more plastic materials that they can sort for, and they can make the capital investments to make those improvements. More motivation for different groups to collect that material and to hopefully increase collection, because that's still a challenge in this country as well, to be able to collect effectively to provide that material, hopefully for more recycled content outlets that will be out there in the future.
Right. And let's turn to Queen Alpa Sutaria. What would you do with your magic wand that would be a game changer?
I love that. I think it's really important economically for us to figure out how to make it a little bit more advantageous, or at least equal, for someone, a community, or an organization to choose to collect and recycle compared to going to the landfill. I think if we could just fiddle with that little bit of economics, then the rest of it flows from there, right? Because then people would think, okay, you know what, I'm not losing money, or maybe I might even be making a little bit of money because I'm recycling, versus just automatically taking things to the landfill. That would make a huge difference.
Great. And you, Erin?
What, I don't get the title of queen?
Oh, you get.
I'm just kidding.
Here's your tiara. There you go.
Thank you. No, it's hard. I feel like every panel I'm on, this is the question that you guys close with, which is, what is the one thing you can do for systems change? And you're like, well, it's many things. But I think I think that you'd need to start with policy. We really need to rethink how we are creating more equitable systems that allow for everybody to have access, and funding mechanisms to make sure that all of the infrastructure and technology is there, and design standards that make sure that everything going into those blue bins that we all have are, it's all designed to go in there. You don't need a decoder ring to do that. And then on the back end of that is this amazing secondary material market that the Cokes of the world can just continue to source from and have this really solid supply chain. That's not one thing, but I think it's one lever that I'm going to be pushing on this year to get us out in front of it. So that's my answer.
You're the one who's going to, for your third wish, you're going to ask for 3 more wishes. I know the type.
Yes, please,
well, somebody on chat said that everything old is new again, and I think this conversation is testimony to that. We have this conversation a lot. We've been having it for a long time, and I love the idea that we're going to that some of this takes time, and that we're going to start seeing some step change, as you said, Erin, and I look forward to having either a different conversation or not even having to have this conversation, because we are on this path. But thank you all for everything that you do on this path. Erin Simon from WWF, Meredith Leahy from Rubicon Global, Steven Secret from the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, and Alpo Sutaria from the Coca-Cola Company. Thank you all, and thank you all for great questions and comments in the chat.
Thank you, Joel.
Thanks, Joel.
I think since people are still around and leaving, I think we can just hit leave, and we'll see you all on email. But thank you all very much for a great conversation.
Thank you, Joel.
Have a great day. Good luck with the rest of your sessions.